As a person who runs Amudim and founded Amudim, there's something that is commonly said by people, and I have to say why it's very true over here, which is the marathon run for Amudim is actually my favorite Amudim project. And the reason why that is because it was started by somebody who, her sister passed away. She reached out to us and said, I would like to do something that will be a very, very big help. And I want to make a difference. And a difference she did make. This is going to be our third year running. In addition, one of our staff members this is not in her job description, but herself had a very, very severe history of abuse. And many of you have actually spoken to her, that's Tzipi. She literally took the bull by the horns and has been running every aspect of this way above and beyond. And when we're in Miami for the actual Shabbos before, it is the most uplifting and emotionally charged weekend that Amudim can ever have. Because being that in this line of work, it's very common that people, I'm not going to say the word they want to forget, but they want to move on with their lives. The name Amudim is synonymous with the darkest time of their lives, and they want to be able to go to that next step, whether it's abuse, whether it's addiction, whatever it might be, suicidality, it doesn't matter. They just want to move forward. So the comment that we say to people is there's no alumni association at Amudim. Other organizations that do amazing work, they're dealing with amazing issues, and then, people are happy based on the outcome and they want to pay it forward. I use Bonei Olam as the best example, right? Who that Bonei Olam helped have a child doesn't want to step up and really do something. But when it comes to the field of mental health in general and behavioral health, it's a very, very, very common thing that people would rather move forward. But the marathon, for some reason, is different. And we have, at the weekend, we have people that have been sober for a number of years. We have survivors of sexual abuse. And people really are just sharing it, and they're running, and they're doing it for the purpose and for the mission of being able to pay it forward. And therefore, the funds that are raised from the marathon is very, very, very specifically earmarked towards helping those specifically with direct treatment costs. So this is something that is very, very, very emotional for me. And this is, something that has become like the baby, even though this is not our largest fundraiser, not our largest event. We don't have corporate sponsors like so many others, but this is something that is very much, the love that we have for this. And it's unbelievable. I also have to say that, Beatie Deutsch, before I ever knew her, before she ever knew us, had so graciously during COVID agreed to host a discussion that was being recorded for our annual fundraiser, and has since then helped us in many, many other areas. And it's really an honor for us to have somebody who has such an amazing history, such an amazing track record, pun intended, and to share some very, very close friends in common. And we have a lot of very good people that are surrounded, and it's really just an honor and a privilege for us to have you here. So, Beatie, thank you so much, and hear what you have to say.
This podium is almost like gonna hide me, guys, right?
Okay, so you don't need the podium.
I really don't need the podium,
Okay.
but I had something I wanted to read, but when I get there, I'll get there. Whatever you like, you feel comfortable. I want you to just feel comfortable, and I'm gonna share some things, but then we can really open up the floor and chat. And I always say, sometimes I'll post something and afterwards want to go run and hide, and I'm like, I don't know why I even said that. And I say, if one person read what I wrote and, needed to hear that, then it was worth saying it. So, and I didn't even start speaking and I feel emotional, but I decided coming here that I really want to be open, because I think what Amudim does is so important. And I think a lot of people struggle. You don't see it, and definitely for me, the last 2 years have not been easy. It's been a big struggle. And I feel like people look at me a lot of times and are like, oh my gosh, she just wins marathons and she's so amazing and she's this incredible, Jewish role model. And you see people from a certain perspective and you think like, well, like they could do it, but like, that's not me. I could never do it. I have so much going on in my life. And like their lives are perfect and mine isn't. And the last thing I ever would want people to think is that I can't do something because it's not possible for me, or like my life is too hard. I think that every single one of us is going to go through deep struggles to get to who we are. And we have to be prepared and willing to go through those intense difficulties. And in the moment, it does not feel easy, and no one wants to go through those struggles. And I always start with my first marathon story because it's so powerful. And every time I think about like, how can I start a different way? I come back to this. And obviously like I wasn't always a runner. I didn't grow up running. I didn't know that track and field was a thing. I went to Manhattan High School in Nava, and I did love running after the ball when we played games together, but like that was it. Like I didn't ever in a million years anticipate that I would be training as a professional athlete for Israel. Finally, was after giving birth to 4 kids in 6 years and feeling completely out of shape and almost like having lost a deep part of myself, I think, not realizing that. I said to my husband, it was literally, I think it was 2015, so 9 years ago. I said to my husband, that's it. I need to do something. I need a change. I need to start exercising. And I told him I'm going to run a marathon. And I'm very grateful that he didn't look at me and say, you're nuts. Like, what do you think? You haven't exercised in 6 years. How are you going to run a marathon? And people say marathon, they don't always mean marathon, but I meant 26.2 miles. I wanted to do that. And he said, go for it. He said, okay, cool, let's do this. And I remember I signed up for the Tel Aviv 2016 marathon, and I was filling out the registration form online. And my husband was helping me fill it out. He says, it asks you estimated finish time. How long do you think it's going to take you? I said to him, don't put down any time. Like, I just want to finish. Don't put anything down. And he said, well, why don't I put down 4.5 hours? And I was doing the math in my head, 26.2 miles. I said 10 minutes per mile. And I said, no way, no, I can't do 4.5 hours. He's like, fine, I'll put down 4:40 to humor me. And we started training. We started running together. I remember I Googled beginner marathon training plan. Thank God they have these Hal Higdon training plans. I look at it, it says you could run 4 times a week. Amazing. I say, okay, fine, I'm busy calculating. I was working, my kids were little. And I said, okay, I could do that. Monday, Wednesday, Friday is going to be my long run, and Motzei Shabbos. My husband and I started a tradition that we try and keep up with still. Date night, Motzei Shabbos run. And I always say it's the best date night because you don't spend money. You don't eat food. Like, everyone goes out Motzei Shabbos. Like, who needs another meal after 3 meals? You always come back feeling better because endorphins are real. And you don't even have to talk to each other, but you got your Yotzei quality time. So it's great. Worked so well. So we started our tradition, and I remember the first few times that I ran, I came back feeling like a different person. I did not realize, I thought I was signing up to get back in physical shape. Like, oh my gosh, I want to lose some weight. I want to feel stronger again. I didn't realize how badly I needed it for my mental state. Like, suddenly I had more patience for my kids. I was taking care of me for the first time as a mother. And I felt like I was breathing again. It was just so incredible. Obviously not, a lot of people like to tell me, I have 2 camps of people. They either tell me how much they run or how much they hate running. And I don't judge people by how much you hate or love running. Like, we're all humans, not runners. But I do think that there is something so amazing. Movement is like medicine, you know? And after 3 months of training, of me building up for this marathon, and the crazy thing is, you take this distance, and this is something I always say, one of the most important things, when you have a huge goal, right? You have something you really want to accomplish. Running a marathon is enormous. And I'm at 0. The most important thing to getting to that huge goal is being able to break it down into teeny tiny baby steps. Because let's say I come back from my very first run. I ran 2 miles and I come home and I feel amazing, right? Oh my gosh, I feel so energized. I'm a new person. I'm doing this. Then all of a sudden, there's that little voice in my head that says, Beatie, you want to run a marathon? There's no way you're going to get there. You only ran 2 miles today. Who do you think you are? Right? We all have those negative voices. And either I could feel immediately deflated. That voice just pricked the balloon. There goes all my excitement gone. You're right. I'm never going to be able to run 26.2 miles. I'm so far away. Or if I know I have my Hal Higdon training plan, I mapped out every single step of the way, I can counter that voice and say, well, today I only ran 2 miles, but tomorrow I'm going to run 4, and next week 6, and the week after 8. I am exactly where I need to be in the process. And if you can answer that every single time the negative voice comes up, then you can conquer that self-doubt and worry. And that is the biggest thing that holds us back. We a lot of times stop ourselves in our tracks before we even give ourselves the chance. It's so far away, it feels impossible. So it has to be broken down into baby steps. I love how my Rav always says it. He says, all you need to do is ask yourself, what am I doing in the next microsecond to get there? Fine. 3 months go by, and it's another Motzei Shabbos, and my husband turns to me after this run, and he says, come on, Beatie, you don't want to just cross the finish line of the marathon. You want to know that you did the best possible time you could. And I looked at him like, so insulted. Like, are you kidding? Running a marathon is the best thing I could do. Like, why do you want anything more from me? And he's like, no, you should really do a half marathon. See what you could do on half the distance, and then we'll plug it into these online race predictors, and it will tell you what you should be capable of. And that will be your goal, right? Like, you have to know what you can do to push yourself to reach it. I was very skeptical, but I went to Gan Soccer, and I ran my own half marathon by myself. And I said, if I feel good, it's 13 laps around the park. Every lap, I'll go a little bit faster. I didn't know anything. I just went every time a little bit faster. And when I finished this run, I got back to my car, I looked at my watch. It took me 1 hour and 41 minutes. And my husband said to me, well, the race predictor says you should be able to run the marathon in 3.5 hours. And I looked at him again and I was like, you're nuts! Not happening. You're basically telling me I'm going to run a distance I've never run before in my life at a pace of 8 minutes per mile that I wasn't running on any of my training runs. Like, it's illogical. And not only that, it's taking a huge risk. Because if any of you guys are runners know, what is the number one mistake runners make? Exactly. You get to the start line, there's so much energy and adrenaline, your feet feel amazing because guess what? They haven't taken a single step yet. And then you know what happens? Everyone talked about it. Everyone scared me. You come to mile 20 and you hit the wall. And the only thing I cared about was finishing, right? So why am I going to risk it? I told my husband, no way. A week later, he's like, listen, I bought you a running watch and I'm going to program it. My husband's now a programmer. That was even before. But he's like, I'm going to make it beep. It will beep if you're going too fast or too slow. He's like, you can start out a little bit slower and we'll have it set that you get progressively faster every single mile. That is the ideal way to run a race. I didn't know anything. I was like, no, but fine. I have a new watch. Okay, I'll try it, whatever. I remember standing at the start line of this race like butterflies in my stomach. This is my first time that I've left my family for a night. Really imagine. My kids are like, I don't know, 6, 4, 2, 1, and I never was away from them. I stayed in Tel Aviv the night before. I have trained 4 months for this race. I'm about to do something I have no idea if I'm going to be able to do. I'm scared. And the race starts, gun goes off, and my eyes are glued to my watch the entire time. I'm just like, am I on pace? Am I on pace? Am I doing it? And before I can even blink, I can't believe it, we've passed halfway. I'm 13 miles in, and I'm feeling amazing. And now I'm just like, whoa, I can even go a little faster. The last 5 miles of the race, my husband ran with me, and my kids were there with signs cheering me on, And I have shared the story a gazillion times. Some of you have probably heard it, and it doesn't matter. I always get emotional every time I share it because in that moment, I had no idea. I was doing something that I was so scared of doing, and I had no idea how many doors it was going to open for me. And I crossed that finish line in 3 hours, 27 minutes, which 4 months before, I didn't believe I could run in 4.5 hours. And the reason I feel it's so important to share is because it taught me something so powerful about life, you know? And it sounds cliched, but it's so true. You know, the greatest growth in life happens when we step out of our comfort zone. The things that are the scariest and hardest for us to do, the things that push us to our limits, are the things that allow us to uncover the potential we didn't even know we had. If I hadn't taken that risk and done something that was really scary for me, I might never be standing here today. You know why? Because it turns out I'm a really good long-distance runner. Most people don't sign up for their first marathon and run the time I did. I was actually the 6th woman in Tel Aviv that day, and I qualified for Boston. But I had no idea I was good at marathon running. If I had said, no, I just want to stay comfortable and do what I know for sure I'm going to be able to do, which is logical. We like to do what we know we could do. I might never have revealed this gift of running that Hashem has given me. It's a gift. It's a gift from Hashem. But every single one of you here have unique gifts. And we come into this world, and this is another quote from my Rav, who said this to me when I asked him if I should go from being a, Kiruv professional helping hundreds of Jewish college students come to Israel to a professional athlete, right? I don't know any other frum mom of 5 in Har Nof, Yerushalayim, Israel, America, the world, whose job is to be an athlete. It's unheard of. And I said to my Rav, should I do this? And this is what he said to me. He said, which really to all of us, he says this to all of us, there is no one exactly like you on earth today with your precise physical, intellectual, spiritual profiles. There never will be anyone like you, and there never has been. You are a one-time phenomenon. If you just close your eyes and think about what that means. You came into this world because Hashem said, the world needs you. You're here to make your mark in some way. Our whole life is a crazy journey of ups and downs for us to figure out, what's my purpose here? What did Hashem give me? What is my unique koach that I bring to the world that no one else can? And it takes a lifetime of work to figure it out. It's not always revealed to us in 1 minute. And sometimes I say I was so lucky that I had this incredible life-changing moment when I ran up my first marathon and realized Hashem gave me this gift of running. But in other ways, that was just the beginning of the journey. That was me starting to unlock what my potential is. But there's so much more work that has to be done. And I could talk and say, I could say it from a certain place, a positive place, whenever we challenge ourselves, we uncover parts of ourselves that we didn't even know existed before, potential that we didn't know we had. And it's easy to say when things are going well, right? Wow, you ran this marathon that you didn't even know you could do such a time. But that same sentence is true when things are hard. We don't want to be challenged. But just this week, we learned that it's in our DNA. Hashem gave Avram 10 tests. Avram's our forefather. If that's the way Avram needed to come into the world, if that's the way Avram needed to grow into Avram, then that's the way we, our children, need to become ourselves. We're not going to grow into who we can be without tests. And sometimes I think to myself, if 5 years ago, I started off saying, I always used to start off, if you had told me the first time I spoke, it was 3 years, because I won my first national title 3 years after I started running. And I would say, if you had told me 3 years ago that I would be standing here today saying, hi, I'm Israel National Marathon Champion, I would have laughed in your face, right? Because 3 years ago, I was a couch potato. If you had told me 5 years ago that I would be standing here saying, I tried to make it to the Olympics, I tried twice, first it was on Shabbos, and then I didn't make it, and I didn't qualify, and it's been 4 years of ups and downs, and getting up, and trying again, and failing, and struggling. Maybe I would have said, I don't want that. I can't do that. That's too much. I might not have taken this path. And yet, here I am, 5 years later, and it's not easy to say it, but I'm better for it. I'm stronger because of it. I've changed so much. And sometimes the stepping out of my comfort zone were things that I never wanted to do. And a lot of times it's things that we say to Hashem, why? Why do we have to go through this? We're not thanking Hashem as we're going through it. We're not like, oh yes, thank you so much for that nisayon. We're kicking and screaming and struggling and crying. And maybe in 10 years, I'll be able to look back with even more wisdom. But every single stepping stone in our journey really allows us to become the shining diamonds that we're meant to be, and to shine Hashem's light in the unique way that only we can. So I'll share another story, and then I want to share a letter maybe parts of it, that I wrote to my Rav on the plane, because really, thank God, I've had a lot of amazing victories. So my first marathon led to me loving running. I have not stopped running since. It was the best decision of my life. The following year, I ran a marathon 7 months pregnant. It was amazing. It was crazy because I also think I had the second half of the race, it felt like a nail was going through my foot every single time I sat. People always are like, oh my gosh, how'd you run a marathon pregnant? I'm like, that wasn't even the hard part. I was literally dealing with some crazy plantar fasciitis, and my kids pushed me from the finish line to the car in a stroller. That's how bad it was. But it taught me something again. It taught me, en davar ha'omed b'fnei haratzon. There is nothing that stands in the way of your willpower. And the year after that, I ran the Jerusalem Marathon. And actually, that was the first time that I raised money for an organization. And I was always terrified of fundraising. And when I'm talking about now running for Amudim, and people tell me, no, I can't fundraise, I say, I get it. I was so scared to fundraise. It was something I did not do. And I'm pretty much not scared of anything. But that was really scary for me. And I'll tell you, it was also right before the Jerusalem Marathon that year, or a few months before, I lost my 14-year-old cousin to anorexia. She was 14, she had an amazing family, and she struggled with an eating disorder. She was hospitalized, in and out. And when she came out of the hospital, honestly, anyone who's dealing with mental health issues and have been hospitalized, you're at the lowest point in your life. And she wasn't able to see her strengths. Even though she had so much going for her. And unfortunately, she wasn't ready to go back to school. And she was at home, but there wasn't really a program for her because she was living at home. Her parents were doing a great job taking care of her. She was going to therapy, but she just didn't feel like, and she ended up taking her life. And it was really devastating for me because I actually, I had struggled with an eating disorder a bit in high school, and I related to that so much. And I felt like, how could a girl, so young, who had so much potential, right, not see her own potential? And we decided to start a program in Israel called Beit Daniela in her memory. Her mother said, when she lost her daughter, she said, I don't want she didn't, go through this tragedy and say, I'm never going to be able to go on again. Literally, after getting up from Shiva, her message was, I don't want any other teenager to suffer the way my daughter did. And she created Beit Daniela with dog therapy and horse therapy. And through Beit Daniela, so I decided, a week before the Jerusalem Marathon, I said, you know what? I want to win Yerushalayim. And I said, let's raise money and awareness for Beit Daniela. And I said, if I get on the podium, we have a great way to do that. And it was crazy because actually, in that marathon training cycle, I discovered I had celiac. Now, I went my whole life, I have 4 siblings with celiac, and I went my whole life being the lucky child who didn't have it, and I only discovered it through running because I really could not run. I was so anemic. I lost all iron in my body, and the number one thing runners need is hemoglobin. If you ever feel weak and tired, go get a blood test. Check yourself, because if you run a lot, you will definitely lose iron. And I discovered I had celiac. And the doctor told me, there's no way you're going to be able to run a marathon in a month and a half. You have to let your body reabsorb. And so I remember going into that race with this desire to win the marathon, but having no idea where my fitness is. I said, I think I could win for Israeli runners. And the race started. I remember standing at the start line of the race. It's a comical scene because if you ever see, I have a few photos, but I'm standing behind Shadrach Kipaji, 7-time Kenyan winner of the Jerusalem Marathon. Right now, it's a study in contrast because he's tall and Kenyan in his short shorts and tank top, and then you have me looking like I look now. I always say like a Yiddish mama out of a kitchen, right? I have my tuchel and I have my long sleeves and my skirt, and no one knows me at that point. So I think a lot of people were probably like, what is that like from mom doing at the starting line? Like, who does she think she is? And I remember the race starts, and I'm running with all the best runners, and I'm looking at my watch. I cannot believe how fast we're going, right? And what's my number one rule? Don't start off too fast. And it felt so good because we're just started. Obviously, it feels good. So there and then I have a moment of conversation with Hashem. And that's another big thing that running gave me. And I hope that people tell me all the time, and I love it. I get so much nachas. They say, I started talking to Hashem on my run because of you. You know what? Whenever I'm on a run, I find it's just the perfect opportunity to talk to God. And here I am in the middle of this race. I say, Hashem, I know I grew up learning en somchim al nes. We're not allowed to ask God for miracles, right? Like, you're not, as Jews. But I'm like, God, I'm not asking you for a miracle. I trained really hard for this marathon. I'm like, all I'm asking you for is a little extra speed. You want to give it to me today? I'll take it. No big deal for you, right? Hashem can do anything. That was my conversation. And for the rest of that race, I did not look at my watch once. I have no idea what pace I'm running. It's all uphills, downhills. You don't know. I just repeated the same bracha we say every single morning. I call it the mami bracha. Hanoten la ya'ef koach. And I'm like, Hashem, when I'm tired, you're going to carry me. You will be my strength. And that's really how we get through every single day, right? Like all the time you wake up, how am I going to get through another day? I barely slept. This kid woke me up. They have so much to do. Hashem, you are going to carry me. And I also repeated over and over, Ve'asa atchem al kanfei nesharim. Hashem will carry us on the wings of eagles. And I'm running through the beautiful streets of Yerushalayim. I found my other trick, tip number 2 of running, run behind nice tall men to block you from the wind. I find this Italian dude to run behind. He doesn't know who I am. I don't know who he is. Great. He's blocking me from the wind. And I'm just running with my heart. And the last mile of this race, it's all uphill, like as if you haven't run enough hill. And I sprinted to the finish line, 3 hours, 9 minutes, fastest Israeli woman. But really, that's how Beit Daniela got off the ground. And it's a cause that I also still raise money for. And I feel like it's so amazing when you go and run a race for an organization. You are doing something for yourself, but it's even more meaningful because you're doing it for other people. And you're doing it for people who can't run, right? When we're running for Amudim, these are people that are at the lowest point in their life, that need the help and support. And you make such a statement when you go out there and you tell people, I'm doing it for Amudim. I'm doing it because I believe taking care of our mental health is the most important thing. And I think that we've come a long way in the Frum community in breaking down stigma but I think we have a lot of work to do. And there are a lot of things that, even just the way our community is, that create mental health struggles, and that can lead, and the more that we prioritize this, and the more that we're open about it, and the more that we're willing to be vulnerable with ourselves and our community, we're really making changes. But we need to be the ones to stand up and to raise money and to run for people who can't. So after that race, actually, I remember the crazy thing is I got a message from a friend. You know what she said to me? She's like, Beatie, I think you could qualify for the Olympics. You know what I wrote back to her? I didn't say yes. I said, you're crazy. I said, no way. Because we always doubt ourselves at every single step. And that's the thing, I used to think people say, like, if your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough. I thought that was the most cliched thing. Who has time to dream? I was barely surviving one day at a time. If I got my kids into bed and everyone had eaten something during the day, I was doing well. Something. I didn't say nutritious. I said if they ate something, that was good. Like dreams, no one has time. And slowly, I started to let myself dream. And I started to realize that, first of all, you're a lot more capable than you know. You have so much more potential than you realize. And now the second part that I've realized in the last 3 years, that it's okay even if you don't realize the dream ever. There is something so beautiful about giving yourself the chance to try. Whether you make it in your lifetime or not, you will always have gone further because you allowed yourself to dream. And so she said to me, in 2016, the marathon qualification time was 2:45. You're not that far off. Now, I just told you I ran the marathon 3:09. I said to her, actually, you have no idea what you're talking about. I'm very far off. No way in my life am I ever running 2:45. You could, like, no. But the second thing she said was like, why don't you join a group? So I joined a group. I joined a training group, which is also amazing. There's nothing like running with other people, which is why I'm so excited to run together in Miami. And I want to tell you that, how many of you here know my Tiveria story? I don't want to repeat it for people who have already heard me. Okay, so we're signing up for Tiveria. We're running Tiveria. That is the national championship race in Israel. I remember thinking, okay, Beatie, what's a realistic goal? No way you're going to win a national championship, right? Like, I'm a newbie on the scene. But they gave out prizes, prize money. That was motivating then. Okay, prize money for the top 10 women. So that's my goal. And I'm training, and every single week, we show up Monday night. It's also amazing. I got out of supper and bedtime. I was like, bye, guys. I'm going for my run. And I did not know what we were doing because we were doing intervals. I never did intervals before. I would always just tell myself, Beatie, if you could follow the fastest group of guys, you're good. And it was crazy. Like the leaps and bounds I made every single week, I would see myself running faster and getting stronger. So much so that it comes to the half marathon national championship a month before the big marathon. And now my coach, it's a pouring rainy day. And I remember standing at the start line of this race. It's in Beatie. I don't know if you've ever been there in Israel. It's Emek Ma'ano. It's a gorgeous area. It's warm. So it's not like New York rain in the winter. It's like raining but warm. And I think to myself as I'm standing at the start line, like, poor me. I'm going to be schlepping 10 extra pounds of water weight, right? I'm the only frum woman there. Well, not, probably, only one wearing a skirt. And then I thought to myself something else. You know, the mitzvahs that we choose to keep, they don't hold us back. They are our wings. And I said, my skirt is going to power me to the finish line. And that was my mantra the whole time. Like, you are going to cross the finish line with your skirt flying. And it was crazy, even though it was such a rainy day and I had no idea what, I ended up running a 1:19 half marathon, winning the whole race. Shocking Israel because they were like, who is this? Shocking my coach also. I was just like, they said, who is this Haredi woman from Har Nof that comes out of the woodworks and wins the national title? Because everyone in Israel in the running scene knows each other. These are all kids that have competed in high school and they go on. And now my coach is like, we're 3 weeks out from the race. And she says to me, she's like, listen, Beatie, I think that you could win the national championship. She said, I know all the women who have run. I know all of them who are signed up. I know what they're capable of and I know what you can do. And she says, all you need to do is run a 6:26 minute mile for 26.2 miles. And yes, I'm glad you're laughing. I always say you could go out and try it for 1 mile and let me know how it feels, right? After that. But she says if you do that, you'll have a 2:48 marathon. Now all of a sudden, like, my ears perk up. You guys, 2:48. It's not so far off from 2:45. Oh my gosh. Never thought about the Olympics in my life, but it would be really cool to qualify. So I asked my coach, I was like, hey, you think I could qualify for the Olympics? And she said to me this, she said, if you try and go faster before the 20-mile mark, oy vavoy lach. Those were her words. Every Israeli Jewish mother. Like, what she was telling me basically is like, Beatie, you're good, but don't be too greedy. If you really, really feel good in the final 10K of the race, maybe you could pick it up a little bit. Now, I don't know, any of you here have ever run a marathon before? Okay. It's 26.2 miles. No one feels really good in the last 6 miles. No one, okay? And now I was trying to calculate in my head how much faster would I have to run to cut 3 minutes off my time. That's a crazy calculation. It's not happening. Well, show up to the race. It's a perfect day. It's Tiveria. It's gorgeous. You guys have been there. It's on the Kinneret. The sun is shining. The sea is sparkling. It's everything I've dreamed about. And everyone in Israel at this point kind of knew me because I just won the Jerusalem Marathon and I ran this marathon 7 months pregnant. I was that crazy Haredi runner. And the race starts. And I am running with the same group of guys that I have run with week in, week out. It's like a pack. And I'm following their feet. And it feels like a dance. And I want to tell you, really, that exercise is not a punishment of our body. It's a celebration of the miracle that our bodies are. And unfortunately, sometimes I only appreciate when I get injured, and I'm like, oh my goodness, did I realize that this teeny little tendon between my glute and hamstring is causing me so much pain. We take it for granted. Every single muscle, ligament, tendon has to come together. We are walking, breathing, living miracles. And for that alone, I am grateful that I run. Because when I say Moda'ani in the morning, I take a breath, I feel so thankful for what we have. And if you start your day with that gratitude, your whole day is different. And that was all I was thinking. I was singing the words of the Eitan Katz song. It's not Eitan Katz, it's Tehillim, but Kol Atzmotai Tomarna, every single limb in my body will say, Hashem mikamocha, like, right? Hashem, thank you. We go through our lives like in a blur, not appreciating it. It is so much to be thankful for. And as we're getting closer to the halfway point of this race, I'm on my way to winning my first national title. Nothing could be more perfect. And suddenly, I look over, basically in Tveria, you run there and you come back, so you could see everyone on both sides. And all of a sudden, I see, on the other side of the course, another woman. And I am outraged. Who is she? How dare she show up and steal my national title, right? Like, my coach told me everyone who was coming. She was not on the list. And I had not even seen her at the start line. I was like, holy cow, who is she? For a second, I tried to reassure myself. I'm like, maybe she's not Israeli. If she's not Israeli, it doesn't matter. But sure enough, I look a little closer. She is Israeli. And not only that, she's run a 2:38 marathon this year. So she's way faster than me. And she's ahead of me. There's nothing to do anymore, right? At this point, you can only run your race. Like, okay, it's over. And for a second, my heart sinks. But I know you got to do the best job you can. And then a second later, I have another thought in my head. And I say to myself, and this is something I had been meditating on every single time I would have a really hard workout. I would say in my mind, if I realize that I have a piece of Hashem inside of me, we all have, we're all created with Tzelem Elokim. We literally have a piece of God inside of us. God is infinite. There's no limit to what Hashem could do. So if there's no limit to what Hashem could achieve, then there's no limit what I can do. I am connected to infinity. And that was my mantra for the rest of the race. I said, Hashem is with me every step of the way, and anything is possible. And then I said, the race isn't over till it's over, and I've got to give it all I've got. And at that point, we're at the halfway part. And all the guys I'm running with, they knew my coach's rules. Am I allowed to go faster? Oy vavaylach, do not. But I was like, peace out, guys. I got a lady to catch. And they told me after, they're like, we wanted to run after you and grab you, but we couldn't touch you. So we didn't. So there you go, another mitzvah that always protects you. I'm running for like dear life, and I have two voices in my head. I have my coach yelling at me, you don't sprint a half marathon. No one sprints 13 miles. I have my coach telling me, Beatie, you're going to blow up. What are you doing? Stop right now. And I have my own voice saying, very calmly, Hashem is with me every step of the way, and anything is possible. And I tuned out my coach's voice, and I let my voice get louder. And it's something I always remind myself of. Belief propels us forward, and fear holds us back. And so often, it's our own fears that prevent us from achieving our potential. We stand in the way of ourselves. And when you believe in yourself, and really, it's not you, Hashem. It's Hashem who gives you everything. You believe in the koch that Hashem has given you. You will go so far. I cannot believe it. Sure enough, after a couple kilometers, I start hearing people cheering. People on the other side are yelling, and they say, Yelena's not so far ahead. That's the lady I'm chasing, Yelena Dolenina, the Russian Israeli who, at that point, held like the fastest time in Israel. And sure enough, I see her. She's right down a little hill. I'm from Yerushalayim. I love hills. So I sprint down the hill. I land right behind her. And I think to myself, okay, all I need to do is run with her for the next, till almost the finish line. 2 minutes to go, I'll give a good kick. I've got a really good kick. And I've regained the national championship. After me following her for half a kilometer, just behind her, I'm running right behind her. She turns around to me and she says, Ani Gemura, I'm finished. It's your race. Keep going. She saw today wasn't her day. She wasn't feeling as good as she thought she had, and she didn't want me to miss out on one possible second of what I could achieve. And she encouraged me to keep running. And that's what I did. I continued running, and I remember thinking in my head, I just need to see my kids at the finish line. At this point, my watch, which I had secretly set to tell me if I was on pace for 2:45, is now telling me 2:43. And I was just thinking, how much faster can I go? And I crossed that finish line, blowing kisses to my kids, So mind blown. To this day, I have never felt that good. Cutting 6 minutes off my time in the second half of the marathon. 2 hours, 42 minutes, 18 seconds. And because of that race, I got a call from the Israeli Olympic team, and they said, we don't normally do this. We accept all our candidates in September. Now it's already January. But because you ran the time you did, which, by the way, I had no idea was significant, basically the marathon Olympic standard had switched off between 2:37 and 2:45. So 2:42 was somewhere in the middle. And they said, we want to accept you as a candidate to run for Israel. Now, I want to tell you what my coach, who was today, was actually a judge on the course then. And he is a proud atheist. He was actually very nervous to start working with me when we started working together because I'm Mrs. Hashem and he's Mr. No God. But we have a great relationship. And he said this, he's like, I looked at all your training logs. Now my coach is a yaki. Like, you don't miss a second with him. It's crazy. He knows math cold. He said, there is no physiological explanation for how you ran the way you did. It was a miracle. And those were the atheist words, not mine. But what I know to be true is that when you open the door for Hashem in your life, Hashem opens the doors for you in big ways and small ways. And you have to look for him in every single aspect of your life. And he's holding your hand in every single aspect of your life. And through the nisyonos, through the challenges, and through the greatness, it's not one without the other. We need both of them. Because the next story I'll share with you is a little different, has a little different ending. So yes, I did qualify to become part of the Israeli Olympic team. 3 months later, World Athletics dropped a bomb, and they announced that, guess what? For the 2020 Olympics, no longer is 2:45 sufficient, and 2:37 isn't good enough either. Now you need to run a time of 2:29:30 if you want to qualify as a woman, and they were cutting the field from 100 to 80. Now, you're not running, you guys, I say those times, it's kind of meaningless, but it's more than 15 minutes faster. It means running a 5:40-minute mile for 26.2 miles. When I heard that, I was really disappointed. And my husband, who you guys heard, he was my biggest supporter from day one, he basically was like, Beatie, everything you're doing is amazing, but you can pretty much give up. Like, you're not getting that time ever in your life. And I said to him, if Hashem brought me this far, if he brought me this far, he can bring me that far. Like, it's not me, it's Hashem. I might as well try. The second crazy thing that happened was they moved the date of the women's marathon, which is always scheduled for Sunday. It's the 2 Sundays, the men's marathon first, the women's second, to Shabbos, because they moved all the outdoor distance events to another island in Japan. That was an even bigger bomb dropped. But again, I thought, if the greatest thing I accomplished in my life here is to say, like, I qualified for the Olympics, but I didn't run because it was Shabbos, like, that is the most amazing thing I could take with me. There's nothing greater. And yes, it was a hard pill to swallow, but it also is ultimately, I only believe Hashem gave me this gift of running to use it to bring more of Hashem into the world, right? That's every koach that we have. And so I accept that also. Well, I did not give up on wanting to compete for Israel, and we had the 2022 World Championships. And I set my sights on that. And I chose the Berlin Marathon to qualify. I still needed to run a time of 2:29:30. And it's intense. It's really fast. It's really hard. I trained all summer for that race. I had this amazing, incredible, another Hashem moment. Hashem sent me a sponsor from one Facebook post to fund my entire family to be able to go train at altitude. Most professional athletes, they train at like higher elevation year round. Places like Flagstaff, Arizona, Mammoth Lakes, California, in Europe, in Italy, in the mountains, because that's where the air is thinner, there's less oxygen, and then when you come down to sea level, you have a boost, and your body feels a lot stronger, and you build hemoglobin that way. So I never got to do that. I don't leave my family for 6 weeks at a time, right? And I decided I'm going to take all of my family to Mammoth Lakes, and we're going to train there, and it was incredible, and I had the training cycle of my life. I am the fittest I have ever been. And I remember the day before we left Mammoth, we were flying back to Atlanta to where my husband's family is for Rosh Hashanah, because it was too quick, we couldn't turn around in time to get to Israel. And we were leaving Yosemite Park, that's where it's like in that area, and my son picked up a rock. And on this rock, it said, in English, Dirshu Hashem bihi matz'u, Kir'uhu bioto karov. It said it in English. Some Christian must have wrote it on a rock. But what are the chances that my son in Yosemite picks up a rock in Chodesh Elul 2 days before Rosh Hashanah, like, seek out Hashem where he's close, call him where he can be found. Like, Hashem was with me every step of the way, so clearly. And I am in the shape of my life. I've had the training cycle of my life. Every workout perfect. I'm ready to run 2:29:30 in Berlin. That was the race I chose. And there was nothing more meaningful to me than going back to Berlin, finishing this race in the iconic Brandenburg Gate, where Hitler stood and made his speeches saying, I'm going to annihilate the Jewish people. Like, what greater revenge on Hitler than me, this proudly observant frum woman, wearing Israel on my shirt, crossing the finish line right there and there. Like, it gave me chills 3 months before the race. And here I am in Berlin. The race happened on Chol Moed Sukkos. So I was going to run on Sunday and turn around and come back for Hoshana Rabbah. I was there for Shabbos myself. And I'm sitting, reflecting on this whole training cycle, and I'm just thinking, wow, like everything, what's going to be my mantra as I'm running through the streets of Berlin? And I thought of the idea of Shira. You know, it's Sukkot, Simchat Beit HaShoeva. And Shira is a very powerful way of expressing ourselves and connecting to Hashem through our unique kochot. That's what Shira is, in essence. It's serving Hashem through our essence. And for me, running felt like my Shira. Like as I'm running through Berlin, that's what I'm doing. I'm singing Shira to Hashem. Okay, the race starts. Perfect conditions. Everything's going exactly according to plan. And I run the first half of this race, 1:14:30. Like you couldn't get smoother. That's amazing. I'm on my way to running 2:29 and qualifying for the World Championships. And then we start the second half. 1 mile into the second half. I have no way to explain it, but my body feels like a car that spontaneously combusted. Like everything is breaking down. Every part hurts. The breathing's getting difficult. I am barely moving, and I have another 12 miles to go. It's not the end of the marathon where you feel terrible. It's just the beginning, and I don't know what's happening to me. And I remember saying, God, this is not the Shira that I was supposed to be singing. Like, what's happening here? Why are you doing this to me? I'm supposed to be qualifying and running this amazing time. And then I say to myself, you have to keep going. You have to finish what you started. That's what my coach always tells me. I don't know why I'm feeling this way. I don't know why this is happening, but I'm just going to put one foot in front of the other. And I said, break it down 1 mile at a time. If you can get through 1 mile, good. And then think about the next. Don't think about 12. And the entire time as I'm running, I am thinking about all the Jews who couldn't escape, who couldn't run, who didn't survive. And I'm here for them. And that's my thought. That's pulling me to the finish line. And I crossed the finish line, and I collapsed. 2 hours, 44 minutes. Completely off. So far from my goal. I was so sick. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I had to crawl around my hotel to pack up my clothes, and I was burning with fever. Now, my coach told me, this is 2021. He said, you should really test yourself for COVID before you go back on the plane. And I was like, no, I can't do that. I got to get home. But I took an antigen test. Anyways, we had tested ourselves twice through the race the day before the race. Berlin made you get tested. So I'm like, I'm fine. The antigen test said you're fine. Okay. I land in Israel. We take our PCR test. Sure enough, the results come back. I am sick with COVID. I was double vaccinated. For 2 years of COVID, I didn't get COVID. Guess what? On the one day of my life that it mattered, Hashem sent me COVID. And I remember in that moment when I said, God, this is not the Shira I'm supposed to be singing. And then I had a second thought, and I said, perhaps the greatest Shira we can ever sing in our life is, God, I don't know why you're doing this to me. I don't understand why this is happening, but I surrender. I accept it's not in my control, and you're in charge. And I accept it with love from you. Ashira LaHashem b'chayai. I sing Shira through my life. Our lives are a patchwork of highs and lows and ups and downs and moments. So much of it is out of our control. The only thing we can control is that response. And I always say, if I had run that time and go up to Shemayim and I can't say, Hashem, look at this amazing race I ran. I ran 2:29:30. I made such a kiddush Hashem. I can't say that. It's not from me. Hashem, you gave me that strength to run such a good race. But you know what I can say? I could go up to Shemayim and say, Hashem, you tested me in the hardest possible way. And the one day that it mattered, you took it all away. The thing I loved most. You challenged me, and I accepted it with love. That choice is mine. That's eternal. Every single choice you make that stretches you, sometimes a teeny bit, sometimes 2 steps, sometimes a mile, sometimes a marathon. Those choices are what define you, and those choices are your eternality. And that's what we take with us to the next world, nothing else. And, I could look back on that race, and I still, it never got better. Because you run a marathon, it's 4 months of training. If it goes wrong, you can't just turn around and run it the next day. It's another whole investment. And I did actually, interestingly, I qualified for the 2022 World Championships, and yet I was injured. I got injured with an IT band injury, and I made some silly, bad mistakes. It was because I decided to do a half marathon when I shouldn't, a week after a marathon, I shouldn't have done it, and I accept responsibility. But I missed out on the 2022 World Championships and the European Championships. And that was the one year it was not on Shabbos. And the following year, the 2023 World Championships were on Shabbos. And then in my quest to qualify for the 2024 Olympics, when I started ramping up training in a very significant way, and I did a pretty intense diet, and I could say that I struggled also for the last 2 years with a lot of eating issues. It's not easy always being a professional runner in that sense, and I worked and have a lot of work to do on it. And I got injured with a tendinopathy that basically, once you injure your tendon, it just is something that's really hard to come back from because they take a really long time to rebuild. It's a bunch of fibers, and when they become frayed and not strong, you can't just, it's not like a bone that heals itself in a minute. It could take a year. And so that meant I was completely out of making it to the 2024 Olympics. And the 2024 Olympics were not on Shabbos. It was the first time in the history of the Olympics, actually, that the women's marathon was the closing of the whole event. And there was nothing I wanted to do more than run for Israel. And so the last 2 years have been really challenging. And as I was sitting on the plane coming here, I'm very blessed to have Rabbi Kellerman as my Rav. And I said, he wrote to me, because I finally came back from this tendon injury, and I had the Valencia half marathon that was supposed to be my first big race back, and I was very excited to run it. And the week of the race, and I had a great training cycle. I wasn't in the most amazing shape. Like, I thought I was going to be able to run 1:16. I had wanted to run 1:14. It's not perfect, but it was going to be a start. And that week, lo and behold, out of nowhere, I got a stress reaction. I said to my Rav, why is Hashem telling me? How much more could I handle? I don't understand. It's too much. I'm not, maybe I should just quit running. Sometimes people say that to me. They say, maybe God's trying to tell you that you should quit running. And he said, first my coach said to me something interesting. My second coach, who, by the way, I switched coaches because my first coach told me I need to try something new. My second coach is also a nice atheist, but he also, he loves telling me Divrei Torah. He fasted on Yom Kippur for me to have a good race. For his first time in his life, he fasted on Yom Kippur for me. And I said to him, and then I got injured. And I said, is God trying to tell me, to stop? He said, listen, Beatie, the Jews had to wander in the Midbar for 4 years. Have patience. Okay, good. I said, great. I said, I'm going to now publish a book of Divrei Torah from the running atheist coach. But when my Rav wrote to me, and he said, he said, how you're doing? I said, I'm checking in on you. I know you had an injury, and I want to know how you're coming back. And I said to him, thanks so much. I wrote a long letter, and I'm going to share some of it because, like I told you, I don't believe that any of us are really on a podium. We're all going through this journey of life, and it's difficult. And I said, I'm feeling better. I just started running. It's not perfect. I think I need another few days. And I said, I hope you don't mind that I'm bearing my soul quite honestly here. I probably really need to go to therapy. It's another thing on my to-do list that I haven't gotten around. It just feels too much. I said, honestly, I'm in a bit of a funk about my training. Sometimes I feel like I'll never get back to where I was. I've been cross-training, but nothing too intense. I feel so out of shape. I really miss being fast and fit. And before I got into this injury cycle, I look back at the workouts that I ran, and I'm so far. All I can think about, is that I've come to this plateau and decline over the last 2.5 years. and I don't know how I'm ever going to get out of it. I said, my husband and I are struggling. We've just going through a lot in life. I feel like I'm managing, but barely surviving. Over the last 2 years, I've been struggling with my body image and disordered eating, and I just miss my old self, the part of me that was so full of hope and potential and optimism, and that running just came so easily. I said, I took a new job with Aish because I had zero funding and I needed a way to support myself, and obviously I did want to make more of a difference for the Jewish people since October 7th. I was really excited about taking the job, but since starting to work, I feel so overwhelmed about juggling everything. And I also just feel deeply sad that maybe I'm giving up on my dream of making it to the Olympics because I can't actually live that professional lifestyle. And, there's this part of me that still wants to excel in running, but I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do it again. I said I'm flying to America for a speaking tour, and I feel like an imposter standing up in front of everyone, like a hypocrite, because I'm talking about having all this belief in ourselves and feeling so passionate about our potential, and part of me just feels like I'm dying inside and I'm not living up to these messages that I'm sharing. And it was cathartic to share those things, and I cried, and I'm sharing it with you now because if you're going through a rough moment in your life and you feel alone or you feel like you're not going to get through it, and I don't necessarily see the light at the end of the tunnel right now. Well, there's two things to know. First of all, this is something that took me so long, but I finally am able to do it better with grace. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to really feel disappointed. It's important to. No one is positive all the time. We're not superwomen. We have real feelings, and we need to embrace those feelings. We need to embrace every part of ourselves to be whole and to be the best that we could be. And so that was for me such a big deal because obviously I'm very good at being positive, and that was my superpower. But I'm learning to make, to be able to embrace the emotions so deeply that that's also my superpower. And secondly, life is messy, and life is not pretty. And again, like I said it before, but if you aren't willing to fail, you will never know the extent of your potential. If you live your whole life scared of failure, so you might not have those difficult feelings, you might not feel the pain and the brokenness and the disappointment, but you also closed yourself off to another whole piece of you. You have no idea what you closed yourself off to. And if you fail and you never get there, and you had a huge goal and you came this far but you didn't come that far, guess what? You still came that far, right? You still made a difference. You still grew in a way that you never would have if you weren't willing to fail. So the messiest, darkest parts of our life are also the most beautiful parts, right? They're really just sometimes I just think about sorry. If you just imagine, the seeds are underground, and there's this beautiful garden that we're planting. And in your imagination, if you can see what it is that you want and what it is that you're planting, that's halfway, that's part of the journey, right? And so even though I'm not there, I say I want to qualify for the LA Olympics. I don't know whether I'm going to make it or not. It's gotten even more difficult. 229 wasn't enough. Then they made it 226.30, and now they've made it 223. I'm not going to run 223. They still really want, basically the reason they keep making the criteria more difficult is they only want 50% of women to hit the criteria. They expect that the other 50% will get in through the ranking. Will I make it? I don't know. But I know that I'll put out that goal, that I've given myself the chance, that I hope that I've encouraged every single Jewish girl and Jewish woman to dream big, to know that there's nothing that holding you back, that you could be 100% true to your values, a strong Jewish woman, a committed Jewish woman, and still achieve excellence in whatever area you want. And that every single one of us, in our own unique way, is here with our own passions and our own talents and our own kochot to bring Hashem's light into the world in that special way. We all have gifts. We all make our mark here. We all go through difficult moments to do that. So I'll just end with a bracha that every single one of us should be able to fill the world with Hashem's light so brightly. That really is what Mashiach is. When the whole world feels Hashem's presence, that will bring Mashiach. And we all do that to the extent that we can. We should be zocha really to bring Mashiach now, to bring our hostages home, to bring all the soldiers home, to be dancing in Eretz Yisrael, running the marathon in Yerushalayim. Thank you. I just realized I didn't read I want to read you my Rav's response. One thing he said that I think is so powerful, which is also connected to Amudim. So he wrote back to me right away, thank God. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if you should bare your soul to your rabbi, but I just did. Okay. He said this. He said that it says in Parshas Vayetze, it describes how Yaakov went from Beersheva, Vayelech Harana. And Rashi explains there was Kvitzas Haderech there. Now he says that Rashi is well aware of the Christian view that makes small of man. And he asks the question, basically that men are not as capable. He says, V'im tomaru kishavar Yaakov al beis hamikdash, madua lo akvu sham? Ilo yeh lebei lehitpalel b'makom sheitpalu avotav v'hein hashamayim achvu. Ehu ar Haran azal. Which basically was explaining that Haran is in Turkey, just north of the current Syrian border, near an ancient town called Samli Orfa. And Samli Orfa is an 857-kilometer walk from Beit El. Google Maps says it would take 175 hours to walk. Hashem made Kvitzas Haderech, but consider the ratio. Beit El is only 29.4 kilometers from Yerushalayim, a 6.5-hour walk. So, after Yaakov walked on his own for at least a week, covering 857 kilometers, that's where he went from, 96.6%, only then the Mesa Mikdash jumped and came another 29.4 kilometers, 3.4% closer. Someone without experience would see this as a question, why so little hashgacha? Shouldn't Hashem's response be much greater than our investment? And he says, the answer is the last 3.4%, the last 9/10 of a mile in the marathon is always so much more difficult than the rest combined. We would never be able to do it with Hashem's help. And that's the thing. We have to run 90% of the way. We have to struggle and go through the marathon of life and climb and work and toil and cry and go through pain. And then the last 10% Hashem steps in and carries us. And Hashem promises us He's going to carry us on His wings till the finish line. We're never going to make it to the finish line alone. And we never are alone. But we do go through that marathon to get there. And we have to sometimes run 857 kilometers before Hashem gives us the Kvitzas Haderech. So Hashem, I think I ran 857 kilometers. I'm ready for you to give me a little Kvitzas Haderech now. Next race, no injuries, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure what your timing schedule is, but if you want to still sit for a bit and if people want to ask questions, so we'll do that. I do want to say that something you said just resonated very well with me. And I use this as the Amudim message. We ran our annual campaign this year, and there was a big debate. What should our goal be? Historically, the last 5 years, the goal has been $5 million, and we've hit it. Sometimes a lot more, sometimes just, but we've hit our goal. Between the economy, the real estate market, the healthcare industry, October 7th, and then a lot of other post issues, fundraising has been down. I mean, I say this, it's affecting many, many organizations. I mean, we sit on coalitions, together with UJA, with many other nonprofits, and it's been something that a lot of people were complaining about. And I kept saying, Mikam Yisrael. At the end of the day, our brothers and sisters in Israel need us. I'm not going to say more, as much, but the fact is there's a fire burning. And when there's a fire burning, people are stepping up to do the right thing, and we have to appreciate that. And I've always been very careful not to get upset about it. Now, again, it's a little bit painful that I don't have the ability to raise the kind of money that we used to raise, and we're not able to do the same things we've done a year ago and 2 years ago, and hopefully we'll get back there. But that's also a test. So as we were going through setting up the fundraiser, people were like, so what's the goal going to be this year? And we didn't make a decision. I told my marketing team, prepare for 5 different numbers. We'll decide, the night before, when we decide. I don't know. We decided we're going to go for $4 million. I figured, listen, we did cut our budget tremendously. We shut one of our offices down. We gave more people working from home. We cut a lot of our non-clinical staff. I mean, like I said, I'm very proud to say that I set up the speakers myself today and the backdrop because that's what you have to do. It's just the reality of the world we're in today. And people were like, Tzvi, you're never going to hit that. I said, listen, whatever happens, happens. We got to do our best. And we didn't hit it. We came just about 50%. And people were calling me almost condolence calls. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? What's with the condolence calls? So whatever is meant to be is meant to be. At the end of the day, if anything, this resonates with me more than anything ever. Because what's the message we try to give people at Amudim? And the message is always the same. Everyone's got to do the best they can, and we got to do the best we can. And that's all that's expected of any of us. And at the end of the day, it's not failure. And that's where people make a big mistake, where they use the word failure way too easy. It's not failure. It's, we got to do what we got to do. Sometimes you got to try harder. Sometimes it just doesn't, you don't get to where you tried getting to. And at the end of the day, there was no more powerful message than I can say is that, listen, we tell this to people that are coming to us for help. Now we're telling it to ourselves. This is where we're at. So, when you said that part, I was very much again, it's different. I'm not running. I'm going to try. But it's the concept of life, and it's the concept of what we all strive for and strive to be. And based on that, I just want to say that thank you. And again, this was very I know this was supposed to be women only, so I apologize. But I really enjoyed it. And thank you very, very much. I would like to offer a few things. We're gonna, if anyone has any questions, by the way, I'll just do this, point blank. Anyone has questions for me regarding